the techniques like information gathering, reconnaissance. The next we'll be talking about how we scan the networks for different kinds of details, or how the fingerprinting of an OS can be done. But before that, as we have discussed yesterday, some introduction about TCP/IP layer. Protocols that are available at each and every layer. We'll discuss some protocols at one layer, one or two protocols at one layer, because whenever we are talking about these kind of attacks, or the kind of techniques which you are talking about, this again ultimately is there any issues? Hello.
Your voice not bottom.
Okay, fine. Just give me two minutes. A quick intro about the other protocols which are at other layers, because this is also very important when we consider the kind of protocols that are available at each layer. So the first layer that we have talked yesterday is about the Ethernet, the physical layer, the data link layer, network layer, or internet layer, and we have transport layer, then we have application layer. So this is what we have seen yesterday, right? Again, in data link layer, we have two sub layers. One is called media access control layer, and the other one is called logical link control layer. So what is this MAC and LLC is that, so whenever we talk about the data link layer, the protocol that determines which can, because it has to again take control of the medium on which the data is flowing, or on which the data is being communicated. So for this, we use this medium access control protocols, and we have some higher level portion of the data link that is often referred to as logical link control, which have the flow control and error control mechanism with respect to the data link layer, and have some interface with respect to the network layer. So whenever we are dealing with data link layer, we have two types of networks. That the first one is the broadcast network, as we can see in the slide, that a broadcast network uses a single communication channel on which all the systems will be receiving. And the other thing is called point-to-point networks, where for each and every connectivity, we have a separate line or a communication that is laid, right? So whenever we talk about the data link standards, so mostly these are part of IEEE 802 standards, which are used for the standards in local area networks. Mostly these are referred with an extension. Like if we talk about 802.11, this is referred with respect to the wireless standards which you are using currently. And if we talk about the 802.3, then this is about the Ethernet standard. So this is how there are different types of standards that are available with respect to the 802. And whenever we talk about the Ethernet, the protocol at the physical and the interface between the data link layer. So this is where the actual MAC addresses will be there in the header format. But again, in Ethernet, what is the current standard we are using in most of the systems? Like most of the computers will be connected to a LAN cable, that is RJ45 cable. That is what connected to our laptops or the systems we are using in our organization. So this is a standard that we have. And for this standard also, we have based on the kind of cables also we use, the speed also vary with respect to that. Now, if we talk about, we have different categories. Again, we generally say Cat6 cable, Cat5 cable. The current standard is about Cat7 to Cat8. So where based on the type of cable or the category of the twisted pair we use, so the speed also varies. So it generally ranges from 10 Mbps to 10 Gbps. Again, also we have the other kind of things for even for fiber optics also. Okay, so the most important part whenever we talk about the data link layer is switch networks. And also yesterday we have seen the generalized architecture view, where we have also seen we have different set of devices which are placed so that each device has its own functionality. So we have yesterday also discussed that, we are having switches, we are having routers, and we are having firewalls or different security devices. And yesterday, and in most generic sense, whenever we talk about any kind of device, we generally say it's a layer 2 device, or it's a layer 3 device, or it's a layer 7 device. So what is this layer associated with that particular device is the same kind of layers which you have seen yesterday, or the kind of OSI layers. So whenever I say it's a layer 2 device, so mostly for switches we say it's a layer 2 device. That means that particular device has a functionality which it can understand the protocols available at the layer 2. Or whenever I say layer 3 device, like routers we generally say, or any kind of switches, or L3 switch we generally say. So whenever we talk about this L3 or the layer 3 switches or the routers, that means along with the kind of protocols at the layer 2, they can also have some understanding about the protocols at the network layer, like they can understand the IP. Because if we talk about routing or any kind of layer 3 functionality, then it, as we have discussed yesterday, layer 3 also has this functionality of routing, as well as it has to assign with an addressing scheme. So along with the addressing scheme, it also need to understand the best path that the communication has to be carried. So for this kind of thing, so we say L3 device. So based on that, when we say a layered device or a specific layered device, that means the protocols or the functionalities of that particular layer are also being used by that particular device. So similarly, whenever we talk about the switch networks, that is layer 2 or layer 3, but here specifically talking about the layer 2 device. So we can see this is the kind of environment where all the devices are connected to a single broadcast domain on which we are using as a one communication point. But again, in the generalized architecture, we'll also use the point-to-point, like let's say from the ISP to the office, we'll be using the point-to-point link. From there, again, inside the organization, we may be using switches for the other connectivity. So this is the basic header of the Ethernet. It contain only a simple parameters like what is the destination address, or the MAC address of the machine on which the communication has to be sent, and the other one is the source address, so on which the communication has to be received. And the other one is the type is nothing but this is again the above layer which is associated with this particular kind of traffic, and the rest of the things is the data. And we can also see the maximum, we generally call it MTU, or the maximum transmission unit. So the maximum transmission unit that is supported by the Ethernet protocol or the current standard is 1500 bytes, right? So whenever we are yesterday also talking about the tool or the packet capturing tool called Wireshark. So whenever we capture this traffic using Wireshark, this is how we can see the Ethernet header value. Okay, so we can see the highlighted one here. This belongs to the specific header value of this Ethernet. So what we have in this, we have the source MAC address, we have the destination MAC address, and we'll have the type. So whatever the type, or generally we see in hexadecimal format in the raw packet. So if we talk about this 0800, that means it belongs to type IP. Or there are some specific protocols like ARP or the other protocols, then we'll get a different set of value. Let's say if it is 0806, then it belongs to address resolution protocol. So based on this type also, what kind of traffic or what kind of data that this particular packet is actually dealing with, that can be known, right? So when we talk about Ethernet header, we have Ethernet header with destination MAC address, source MAC address, as well as the type of data. So this is what we are talking about. So based on the type, the IP addresses or the kind of protocols will vary. If it is 0800, it is IP datagram. If it is 0806, again it is ARP or address resolution protocol. Again, we have two kind of packets in this ARP. One is ARP request, the other one is the ARP reply. So the other protocol at the data link layer is called ARP, which is nothing but address resolution protocol. So why ARP is used? So we are talking about the switch network. First, we'll see this scenario, how the switch or any kind of system in the LAN functions in terms of network communication. Now, let's say whenever I switch on the system, let's say there are 10 systems connected to a switch or in a LAN. Now, let's say there is a system A, okay, or let's say there is an IP address of 90.1. Now, this machine has to communicate to a machine called 91.4 or 90.4. Now, how this machine will come to know that this is the exact machine on which the communication has to be sent, because there are other systems are also connected on the same switch. So for this, what we'll do first, actually what happens is whenever this type of communication is generated on the switch, we generally say switch is an intelligent device. Intelligent device in the sense, switch has the capability to actually map what is the IP address and what is the corresponding MAC address of that machine. Okay, so now let's say this 5 machines are connected to a single switch. Now let's say this is machine A, it want to talk to machine D. Now, whenever machine A want to talk to machine D, again there are B, C, E, there are other systems also. Now, whenever machine A wanted to talk to machine D, it doesn't know where to actually send the communication, because it is the first time it is trying to understand what are the systems that are connected on the network. Similarly, switch also functions at layer 2. Switch also have this capability of understanding what are the systems that are connected to it ports. Let's say that is an 8-port switch. That means it has to understand what are the MAC addresses of all the 8 systems that are connected to it, right? So then only it can easily understand. And we say that switch is a one-to-one communication. That means whenever a communication reaches from one system, it is directly sent to the other system. So no other system on the same switch will receive that communication. So this is how it has to understand. But how to make this functionality happen? That is where the address resolution protocol has come into picture. Now, what ARP does? ARP is nothing but to translate the IP address into the MAC address, right? So whenever we are, let's say the machine A with 90.1 is trying to communicate to machine D with 90.4. Now, whenever machine A wanted to have communication with 90.4, what it will do, it doesn't know where to go. So the first thing what it will do is it will try to broadcast to all the systems that are available, or to all the ports that are available on the switch. Now, let's say this machine A is actually sending this broadcast to all the machines on the network. Now, whenever it is broadcasting, what it will say? It will say, this is my IP address and this is my associated MAC address. Let's say the MAC address is A. So this is my MAC address. I want to reach 90.4. I only know about the IP address, but I don't know where this system is located on the network. So I just need to have the corresponding address or the MAC address of the system, so that I can directly deliver this communication to that particular machine. So in this case, what happens? Whenever A initiated the communication, it has to send to one of the port in the switch also. So switch will take a note of this communication, that it is receiving a communication on port 1 with an IP address of 90.1 with a MAC address A. So this will be entered into the switch address table. Now let's say this is a broadcast packet. It is sent to each and every system on the network. Now let's say there is a machine D with IP address of 90.4. This is the actual indent or the actual machine which has to receive the communication. Rest all the systems which receives the broadcast will actually drop the communication, because that IP address doesn't belong to that particular system. Now even 90.3 may receive the communication, 90.2 may receive the communication, but they all drop the communication because that IP 90.4 doesn't belongs to that system. Only who will respond? The system with 90.4 will try to respond back to 90.1. Now again, it will send the communication to who? To switch. Now again, switch receives the communication on, let's say, port number 4. Now again, switch receives some communication on port number 4. Again, it will take a note of that. On port number 4, I have received a communication with IP 90.4 and with a MAC address of D. Now switch has two addresses now. On port number 1 with a machine A, on port number 4 with machine D. Now it understands, okay, 90.1 has been requesting to 90.4. Now what happens? Instead of broadcast, now switch will do a unicast communication because it now knows exactly where these two systems are connected on the switch. Now A will be directly talking to D. This communication will not go to the other ports like B, C, or the other ports on the switch. So this is how switch will learn all the MAC addresses of the corresponding IP addresses using the protocol called ARP, or the address resolution protocol. So similarly, not only the switch mechanism, so every operating system also has the same functionality. Every operating system will also do the same kind of thing that is inbuilt into the OS part. Whenever the OS also dealing with these kind of, because as we have seen, whenever we open a Wireshark, we may be receiving a lot of communication on the wire, or the traffic can be captured. Now, whenever we are receiving all this communication, now the operating system also try to learn, okay, what are the IP addresses that are received and what is the corresponding MAC addresses. It will try to store everything on the ARP table or the ARP cache. Okay, so this is how we have discussed why ARP is used. Let's say I'll just show a simple command where we can see. Now let's say this is my console. I think everyone is able to see this. So this is the command I can see. Click on ARP space -A. Okay, now we can see there are a lot of addresses that has been received on this particular system. So there I can directly see these kind of things. One address I got 192.168.10.2. Okay, so this is the corresponding IP address, and this is the corresponding physical address of that. And there is other machine 10.5. So the corresponding MAC address is also seen. So this is how all the communications or the corresponding IP addresses will be noted by the system. This is the operating system. Similarly, the switch also has its own table called as MAC address table, where it also stores all these corresponding addresses. Okay, now let's say we'll see an example where I also open Wireshark in parallel, because that is where we easily can understand. Okay, as we have seen, okay, so these are the adapters that are available on my particular system. So let's say I'm trying to check for this Ethernet. I'll see whether I can able to get any kind of request on this. Okay, so now you can see the first thing. Okay, whenever I have started this communication, I have received a particular protocol called ARP. Now, what this ARP is doing, let's say my IP address is 10.2. Okay, now this particular 10.2 or some address, it is trying to connect on 10.3. Now, this is the ARP packet. Now, what exactly you can see, this is the broadcast, because it doesn't know where exactly the packet has to be sent. Now, you can also see the destination is a broadcast. That means all these packets are being sent to each and every system on the network. Now, let's say this is 10.3, which is responding back. What it is saying? Okay, this is 10.3, which is located at so-and-so MAC address. So for ARP, we have two packets, corresponding associate packets with ARP, or the address resolution protocol. We have ARP request. The other one is ARP reply. What happens in terms of ARP request? ARP request is a broadcast which is sent to all the systems on the network. The other one is ARP reply, which is a corresponding packet or the corresponding communication that has been sent. Now, this is what we can see the layered wise dissection of that. Now we have discussed the Ethernet protocol. What Ethernet protocol contains? It contains the destination MAC address. It is broadcast because we are receiving it as the on all the systems. So it doesn't all F's in the sense this hexadecimal format denotes that it is a broadcast. That means each and every system on the network will get this packet. Now I am initiating the connection because I don't know where to go. So I'll say this is my source IP address, right? So I am trying to send a packet to the broadcast along with my source IP address. And what are the other parameters that is associated on the Ethernet header? We have seen it is ARP. If it is 0800, it is an IP packet. If it is 0806, it is ARP or the address resolution protocol. Now we can see the same kind of request on the ARP. So this is the ARP header. Okay. So we can see what is the first type or the first parameter of ARP header is the hardware type. Hardware type in the sense the Ethernet protocol or the kind of parameter is 48-bit MAC address. So this is the addressing mechanism or the protocol we are using for the hardware type. And what is the protocol type? So it is saying 0800, that is nothing but IP version 4. So we are using an IP version 4 for this communication. And also it says hardware size. Hardware size is nothing but the length of the address. So hardware 6 into, we have to multiply it with 8 bits. That will become 48 bits. So 48 bits is the addressing length of the MAC address. So every MAC address is 48-bit length. And in this 48-bit, the first 24 bytes belongs to the vendor or the kind of company which manufactured that particular network card. And the rest of the 24 bits belongs to the unique code of the card. And also this Wireshark also has the feature. Now here I'm seeing it as some Realtek or some kind of names we are seeing, Quanteco, some kind of things. So this is how. So this first 24 bytes bits belongs to the vendor. So even the Wireshark or the tool is also capable of resolving whether to which company this particular network card belongs to, right? The rest of the 24 bits belongs to the unique identifier of the network card. And also we have protocol size. Protocols is nothing but 4 we have got, and that means 4 into 8 bits, that is 32-bit. It is IP version 4. Similarly, if we have IP version 6, then we'll get accordingly of 128 bits, right? And the other most important part of ARP is we need to understand whether this ARP is a request or a reply. So that this opcode is one of the parameter which tells whether this particular ARP is a request or reply. Now we can see if the opcode is 1 or the operation code is 1, that means it is a request. Here it is saying it is a request. Why? Because this opcode value is 1. And the other parameters we have is the sender MAC address. So this is me or my communication that is going on. So this is my MAC address and this is my sender IP address, because I know that what is my IP address. But here we can observe the target MAC address is blank. Why? Because it is a broadcast. It is sent because this is our ultimate goal of this particular ARP protocol. We need to get this target MAC address because I know the target IP address 10.3, but I don't know where this MAC address is located on the network. So to find out this, I am initiating a request called address resolution protocol request. Now this is the request. So I have all the parameters filled, but I don't have this MAC address that is filled. Now we'll go to ARP reply. Now we'll see what kind of packets we got on this. Now let's say the same kind of thing. The same, it contains the Ethernet where it contains destination MAC address and the source MAC address. Now here we can observe this is a reply from the 10.3 or the IP address from which we are getting the reply. Now here we can say this has become source now because 10.3 is replying, but it is replying with its MAC address. Replying to who? 90.1, because already 90.1, already 10.2 already disclosed it MAC address, so it knows where exactly to be sent. And again, the type is ARP again. Now we'll see what are the parameters that are there in the ARP reply. Again, the hardware type is Ethernet. We are using Ethernet standard. the protocol we are using is IPv4 or the IP version 4. We have hardware size 16 to 8 bits, 48 bits MAC address. We have protocol size 4 into 8 bits, 32-bit MAC address. Now here we can observe the difference. The operation code is 2. Earlier in the ARP, it was request as 1, whereas here it is reply 2. That means if it is 1, it is ARP request. If it is 2, it is a ARP reply. Now here you can observe this sender MAC address is from 10.3. So 10.3 is saying that this is my MAC address and this is my IP address. To whom it is sending? Because it already know, because we have already sent in the ARP earlier request, what is the MAC address of 10.2. So it is replying to 10.2 on this MAC address. Now this particular table has been filled. That means whatever our intention to get the MAC address of 10.3 is resolved using ARP reply. So this is how ARP protocol works to understand or try to resolve what is the corresponding MAC address for the IP addresses. So this is how all the systems on the network will learn. The systems that are connected to the network, even the switches will also learn in the same fashion. That means based on the traffic. And one more thing is that the ARP is dynamic in behavior. Dynamic in the sense, before this command and before this tool to understand, are we doing any kind of communication or any kind of manual intervention to understand these protocols or to addresses? Now let's say in the same thing. Now when I type ARP-A, so I got a long list of addresses. Now to understand all these kind of IP addresses, are we doing anything? No. Why? Because these are dynamic in nature. Based on the traffic that is coming onto the network or based on the traffic that is sent to the network, accordingly the operating system will try to fetch the corresponding IP addresses and MAC addresses from the system or from the traffic. So that is how it is dynamic in nature. And this static are already associated with the network interface, because whenever we assign any IP address to the network by default, because you can see all the MAC addresses are only one. Okay, that means this MAC address belongs to one adapter, this MAC address belongs to the other adapter, because all these are belongs to corresponding MAC addresses of the same system. And one more thing is, for every network IP, we have a broadcast IP again, which is all Fs. So these are some of the static which comes along with the once we enter the interfaces. But this dynamic behavior of the ARP, so this will be based on the type of traffic that is generated or the traffic that is captured by the network adapter. Why we are discussing all this in detail? Because based on the vulnerabilities in the ARP or based on the protocols what we are going to discuss, along with the functionality of the protocols, we also have these vulnerabilities on which the attacks are based. Now there is one popular attack which anyway we'll be discussing after this session, like man-in-the-middle attacks or ARP spoofing attacks. We have seen MAC spoofing attacks. Why actually this spoofing is or the man-in-the-middle attacks are very much easy in terms of ARP is because of this dynamic behavior of the ARP. Because we are not actually making any manual intervention to understand this. If you are not noting this, we don't know what exactly the IP address of 10.2 or what exactly the MAC address of 10.5. So because this dynamic nature. Similarly, what happens is using this vulnerability in the protocol, an attacker may also generate or craft certain packets so that instead of this MAC address for this 10.2, the attacker may insert his own MAC address. Similarly, for 10.5, he may insert the same MAC address. Now, what happens in terms of man-in-the-middle attack is the same MAC address is given to both the parties. Let's say I'm an attacker. What I will say, my MAC address is CCDD. Let's say this MAC address will be sent to both 10.2 and 10.5. Now, instead of the actual MAC addresses, they will be talking to me instead of themselves. So whatever the communication 10.2 thought it is sending to 10.5 and vice versa, they will be sending to an attacker. So this is how it is easy to actually make these attacks possible because of the existing vulnerabilities in the protocols. So that is where we have to understand what is the protocol and what kind of, again, we will see what kind of remedies that we can take or kind of recommendations that we use in terms of when we see the attacks. So this is how the ARP is used for understanding the kind of resolution. Okay, this we have seen why ARP used, because to translate. So this is the header value, what we have seen in the Wireshark also. We have hardware address type, protocol address type. We have address length of both hardware as well as protocol. We have operation which decides whether it is a request or reply. Then we have source hardware address. We have source protocol address, nothing but MAC address of the source and IP address of the source. We have target hardware address as well as the target protocol address, nothing but destination MAC address and destination IP address. And again, based on whether if it is 1, it is a request. If it is 2, it is a reply. So this is how we have seen. Again, same thing. If it is 0806 in the Ethernet, it is ARP. If it is 0800, it is IP. If it is 086DD, 0x in the sense it is hexadecimal notation. If it is 86DD, it is IP version 6. Now there may be some sort of traffic of IPX also if it is 8137. So based on the codes, we can assume what is the underlying protocols. So this is how we have seen already operational request. If it is 0, if it is 1, it is a request. If it is 2, it is a reply. And these are the some of the commands what we have seen. ARP space -A. This will list out all the corresponding or the associated IP2 MAC addresses. Now there may be some sort of thing where we want to statically or manually assign or map an IP address with an MAC address. So this is the command we can use. ARP space -S, the corresponding IP address with the corresponding hardware address. And there are also two concepts of ARP called gracious ARP. So this is generated whenever there is a need that the system will itself broadcast saying that this is my MAC address. One such feature is called IP conflict, where we have seen in our organizations, if someone put the same IP address on the system, we'll get a notification saying that there is a conflict of IP address on the network. So this is because whenever we start the system itself will try to broadcast saying that using gracious ARPs, you can see the source, the sender as well as destination IP address are same. So whenever a system gets these kind of packets, if the system detects that the same IP is assigned to it, it immediately responds that there is a conflict on the network. Okay, again, we have concepts like ARP proxy, because whenever we are switching from one network to the other network, the IP is only carried because IP belongs to the network layer or the layer 3, but ARP belongs to only layer 2. So layer 2 is not carried on to the upper layers. Okay, because IP has connection with the network layer, it can reach up to network layer. But let's say there is a chance that from our organization, we are talking to the internet. Let's say we are browsing some website. Okay, so in this case, what happens? Our system MAC address will not go to the other website of the which is on the public. Why? Because this layer 2 or the MAC address is only between the corresponding or the layer 2 device only. That means at most our MAC address, if it is directly talking to the router on the organizational level, it can reach only up to the router. Now your router will actually proxy this or do this in terms of communication. It will send its own MAC address to the corresponding website if it's directly connected. So this is how the MAC address will keep on changing, but the IP will be floating entirely till it reaches the actual communication. Again, we have seen there are a lot of vulnerabilities. Again, we have ARP spoofing and ARP flooding, where we have different kind of attacks that we can will be discussing in the coming sessions. So where we can easily spoof the kind of systems, because it's very easy, because as ARP is dynamic in nature. This is what one of the attack of man in the middle attack. The attacker is saying that he is trying to update his MAC address to both the machines, right? So whenever there is a communication between PC1 and PC2, actually that communication is actually flowing through the attacker PC, because attacker MAC address is updated in both the systems, right? So this is how the ARP is there. And the other protocol we are trying to discuss is about the layer 3 protocol, or it is called as internet protocol. So this is, again, we are saying it's a layer 3 protocol because it belongs to the network layer. Okay. So internet protocol, again, it is designed in such a way that we can communicate between two systems for interconnection of the systems. And the one feature of this particular IP protocol is called fragmentation, because we have seen in the Ethernet protocol, we have learned about the MTU, or the maximum transmission unit. That means the Ethernet standard supports only 1500 bytes. Now let's say there is a file. Let's say we are sending a 4 MB file or a 10 MB file. Now in this case, what happens? This file has to be sent. 10 MB file has to be sent over this 1500 bytes maximum transmission unit. But a single packet cannot accommodate 10 MB as it is. So what we'll do? We will divide the standard divides these protocols in the IP layer into different number of packets, so that it will make an arrangement so that it will assemble and deassemble at the destination as well as source. So that is how this fragmentation and reassembly will be done. Along with that, we have end-to-end delivery of protocols because of this routing protocols, where we choose the best path that, and we assure that the communication is reaching from one point to the other part. Okay. And also we mostly know about version 4 and version 6, but there are some kind of earlier developments also, but TCP IP protocol suite has started with TCP version 4. So that is how they have also given this IP as version 4 from the whenever this TCP IP protocol suite has been started. And also we have version 5, but some R&D developments and due to some other updations, they have released directly on the version 6. So this is how IP routing is responsible. So whenever, let's say I want to send a communication from 11.0 network. So whether based on the route or based on the destination it has to take, because it has to, let's say if it has to reach 31.0, so from 11.0 to 21.0, it will go to 31.0. Again, if it has to reach 41.0, again it will go from 11.0 to 21.0 to 41.0. So based on the available path or available routes, that communication will be sent. So this is how we can see from one point to the other point, the communications will be sent. But these are the important flags that we can mostly see in terms of routing. The first one is with respect to the system as well as the host. That means it belongs to the host network. The other one is the gateway. So whenever there is an switching from one network to the other network, then we see this G or the gateway kind of thing, because it and onto which interface, because every system may contain 2 or 3 interfaces, because routing occurs only when there are multiple interfaces. Okay, so we can use this kind of interfaces whenever the IP is used, right? So this is the IP header which we're talking about. The first one is called the IP version. This is where we are seeing the IP version. It's 4 bits. What is the destination IP? 127.0.0.1. Sir, whenever we are talking about the IP addresses, again, there are 5 classes in terms of IP version 4. Whereas in IP version 6, we don't have any class kind of information. Basically, these classes are used to actually denote how many kind of systems that can be accommodated into one network. Okay, so but again, there are some addressing mechanisms or networks which are reserved for certain aspects. Now, if we talk about class A, we have class B and class A, which are used in the organizations, and class D and E for R&D. In class A base, if we have more number of systems that are connected, we use class A. If we have medium-sized connections, we go for class B. If we have less number of systems that are to be connected in a network, we go for class A. This, I mean, I'm trying to say it in a normal layman kind of things. But again, there is altogether a different kind of IP addressing mechanisms of the classes that are there. So now for every class, there are certain sections. For every class, there are certain networks which are already reserved or which are free to use. So in that sense, this 127.0.0, it is actually given for every system to actually basically understand. Let's say in an operating system, I am hosting a website. Okay, I want to test whether this particular website is working fine or not. What generally we'll do in terms of development, we simply open a browser, type localhost, or we'll say 127.0.0.1. Why? Because this particular 127 network, this IP address is associated to the same adapter. That means it is talking to itself. So whenever we generate a request on localhost, the request will again process within the operating system and try to check whether this particular interface is working fine or not. So similarly, we have 10 dot series network, like we can use 10 dot on most of the organizations. We can see 10 dot network, 10.0.0.1 or 10.1.2.2. So this 10 dot is also freely anyone on the internet or on the public can actually use this without asking anyone on the organizational level. Whenever we come to class B, again we have certain free networks like 172.16 to 172.31. I can use any of these networks without any without requesting anyone. So this is within the organization. Similarly, in terms of class C, where I can use this network to accommodate only like 250 systems. For this, we can use the IP or the network called 192.168.0 x.x. That means 192.168.1.0 to 192.168.254.0. So these many networks I can use without any intervention. Apart from these IP addresses, if I want to use any other IP addresses, that I have to pay some licensee or where the ISPs will actually buy. Now we can see we say public IP address. If I want to have a public IP address, I need to pay some amount. That is where we are paying for the broadband, or we are paying for the ISPs to actually get information from these public IP addresses to actually talk to the internet. But whenever I want to use 192.168 network or 10 dot network, I'm not going to ask anyone because this is free to anyone I'm using within the organization, right? So similarly, 127 is also for the local host or the loopback adapter where I can use on the same interface itself. So these are the different parameters of the IP. The first one is IP version 4. Based on the 4 bits, whether I can decide whether it is a version 4 or a version 6. I have header length. Header length is nothing but the entire length of the IP header. Because what happens is, along with the packet header or the entire MTU of the Ethernet, IP also has its separate header value because it carries some routing information, some other related routing paths. So based on that, it also has some header information which is stored in the options part here, right? And also we have some other parametric type of service. This is like to detect the kind of congestions, or in terms of other congestion networks, what kind of bandwidth that need to be allowed to actually negotiate between two systems. The type of service can be used. As we have seen, this total length is the entire packet length or the frame length. And this is very important, the identification fragment. This is also one important part of the IP, which we are seeing, right? The MTU. The maximum MTU size is only 1500 bytes, but if there is a large system or the large file that has to be sent, then it has to be divided into number of fragments. But I'm fragmenting it, that is okay. But how the destination system understands that it is not a single packet, it is a fragmented packet. So that is why we generally use this fragmentation techniques. For every packet that is generated, we have a fragmented ID. Let's say if the single file, let's say I'm sending a 4 MB file, that means all the 4 MB related packets will have the same fragmented ID. So by seeing this ID itself, the destination will come to know, okay, all these packets belong to one single packet, so it will try to reassemble at the destination. So this R is for reserved flag. Currently we are not using it. And this is the do not fragment. Whenever this fragment flag is set to 1, that means there are no fragmented packets. It is a single packet. But whenever this MF, the MF is set to 1, that means more fragments. So there is a fragmentation that we have to assign with this ID. This is the offset. So it will denote what is the next packet that is starting with the number of bytes. And the other important part in terms of IP is called TTL, or it is time to live. We'll discuss what is time to live, because this is also one important parameter which is accommodated in the IP. The other one is called the protocol. This protocol will denote what is the next layer that is above it. Again, we have discussed every application will be dependent on the kind of protocol it uses. So now here the protocol will say whether it belongs to a TCP or whether it belongs to a UDP. So what is the next transport layer that is associated with that kind of communication? Now again, we have some checksum value here, and the other values is the source IP address as well as the destination IP address. And next one, we have options where, as we discussed, there are some routing and other layer 3 related information will be stored here, and the rest of thing is data. So this is all the parameters or the important parameters that are part of the IP header whenever we are trying to capture. We have version 4 header, type of service, total length, identification fragment. We have fragment flags, time to live, and protocol. And so these are the protocol values we are seeing, right? A protocol. So based on the value, we can say what is the next protocol that is associated. So if the value is 0, it is called IPv6 hop-by-hop option. If it is value is 1, we have ICMP or the Internet Control Messaging Protocol. Mostly we use 6 for TCP, Transmission Control Protocol. 17 is for UDP, User Datagram Protocol. So these are the two most widely used transport layer protocols. And if it is 9, we have Interior Gateway Routing Protocol. So for different routing protocols also, we have different kind of values. So based on the values, we can have this what is the kind of protocol that is being used. We'll see one such example in real time, again using Wireshark. Let's say I take any kind of packet here. Okay, let me take only this ICMP, or what I will do, we'll see whether I'll also try to say about the fragmentation also. Okay, now we can see there are some fragmented packets also in the background, but first we'll discuss what are the parameters that are available. Okay, so first let me take any single packet here for this explanation. So again, we can see the ARP is generated because I don't know where is 10.5, so I'm generating to find out where is 10.5, then accordingly this fragmented packet is done. Okay, now let's say this is the IP protocol we are discussing about. Again, the same kind of thing. What is the first protocol we get? We get Ethernet. Ethernet has what is the destination MAC address. Next one is the source MAC address. But here we can observe, earlier we have used it, we have seen it as ARP. It is 0806 because we are dealing with IP to MAC address resolution. But now we are dealing with a different IP protocol. So here we are seeing it the type as 0800. Again, it is 0800 in the sense it is IP version 4. If it is 086DD, it is version 6. So it is 0800. So we are dealing with IP version 4. Next comes the IP header. So we'll see what are the parameters that we have, whether all the discussed parameters are available or not. Now here we can see what is the first one, the header, the version number. We are using IPv4, so it is version 4. The next one is the header length, that is 20 bytes. Generally, we get only a single number here, but this 5 we have to multiply with 4 bytes. So 5 into 4 bytes, we get 20 bytes, the header value of the packet alone or the IP header alone. So generally we remove this to actually get the actual frame size. Okay, so let's say if it is 6, then it will be 6 into 4 bytes, that is 24 bytes. So accordingly, this number has to be multiplied with 4 bytes. The other fields we are discussing about is the differentiate or the ECN fields, where if there is any kind of congestion notification or any kind of differentiate service, then this kind of information will be stored here. And this is the total length, the 1500 bytes of the MTU, out of which 20 bytes is for Ethernet header. So overall, we can say that actual data is about 1480 bytes, right? So this is the one we are talking about, the identification, which is generally used in terms of fragmentation, that also we'll discuss. And these are the flags what we have discussed. The first one is a reserve bit, it is not set. And we have don't fragment, this is also not set, but here we have more fragments set to 1. That means whatever the packet we are seeing in this demo, it is a fragmented packet. So more than the MTU size, we are sending some different kind of value. So that is where we are seeing this more fragment. And we are getting the fragment offset as 0 because that may be the first packet in the communication. And similarly, we have time to live, that is denoted as 128. And we have the protocol, that is ICMP. That means this is the protocol after IP. So after IP, is there any kind of protocol that is associated, that is disclosed here? Okay. Similarly, we have 6 for TCP, 17 for UDP, similar way. So we have source IP address as well as destination IP address. So this is about the IP header. Is sequencing of datagrams available at IP? Yes, sir. Sequencing in the sense, this is what the fragmentation we use for the fragment based on the fragment ID at the IP layer. It will be decided what kind of whether they are in the same loop or not. Okay. So we are talking about the fragmentation. We'll see how we can generate. So this is one command I have used to actually generate the fragmented packets. I'm using the normal ping command. Ping is used to generate the ICMP response and reply. So I'm using ping. If I directly use ping and IP address, then I'll get, if the system is up, I'll get the reply. But here, instead of this ping, I am also using a switch called -L, which is for specifying the length of the type of the bytes or the data that I'm going to generate. So here what I have done, I have given 50,000. So instead of the normal MTU size of the Ethernet is 1500 bytes, but here I am mentioning it as 50,000. So this has been sent to the destination and we are getting a reply. But what happens in the background, this length is beyond my MTU size. So the sender has to fragment the packets and the receiver also should be reassembled. So that is why here we can say the bytes is 50,000. That means once it receives all the 50,000 bytes, then it is specifying that, okay, I have received 50,000 bytes on the first packet. Similarly, it has received 4 such types of copies with all 50,000 bytes each. That is what the reply. That means the receiver also should be in a position to understand what is the kind of data that we have sent. So we will see one example whether that is achieved or not. Now we can see this is the first packet as we have discussed. These fields are very important, the fragmentation packet. Actually, this is the hexadecimal format of the ID, but for our understanding, we'll take this. It's 12,054. Now in the flags, we have seen more fragment is set to 1. That means there are yet more other packets which are in the pipeline. Now this is my second packet. Again, you can see the ID is same, 12,054. Again, more fragments is set to 1. But here we can observe the fragment offset is changed. Again, it is 1480 because out of 1500 bytes, the 20 bytes of header length is removed. So the offset is starting at 1480. Now, if we talk about the third packet, same ID, 12,054. Again, more fragments is set to 1. But you can see the fragment offset. Again, it is added by 1480. Similarly, fourth, it has been incremented. Rest of the things are same. Fifth packet, it is 5920. Rest of the things are same. So we'll see the last packet where everything is assembled. So there are a lot of packets that have been generated because it is a 50,000. Almost 36 packets have been generated. You can see also the white chart is also giving the number. So there are 36 reassembled packets are there. That means we have whatever the data we have generated using 50,000 bytes is being accumulated in 36 packets. So this is the 37th or the 36th packet. Now here where now we can see the fragment ID is also same because this is only the same packet we are trying to get. Now here we can observe the more fragments is 0. That means earlier in the earlier packet, in the last but one packet, you can see still more fragments is set to 1. But in the last packet, you can observe the more fragment is set to 0, right? That means there are no more packets after this particular packets or after this IP packet. So it is 0, and you can observe the fragment offset is 488.40. If we add again 1480, we'll get exactly the 5,000 or the 50,000 packets. So now once the destination receives all these 36 packets, then it will try to assemble things. I have got one chat request. Sir, I'm getting request timed out when I enter 50,000. Sir, whether you are issuing the same command, I'm just typing the command here. And one more thing is in the recent kind of operating systems, when we talk about Windows 10 or so, they also support one concept called bulk packets. or the kind of bulk pings. What happens is even we give 50,000 also, the packet will be sent as one packet or the kind of jumbo packets we generally say. So all these kind of things will be accumulated into one. So this is the command that have to be used for better kind of thing. Better it is suggested to use on the older operating system before Windows 10. And also we will get the reply from the destination only when there are no kind of security features that are available on the destination, and the system should be alive on the network. Now let's say whatever the destination I'm trying to ping is having a firewall on, or the firewall or any kind of antivirus feature is enabled on the device, that security features will be blocking that. So we'll not be able to get the reply even the system is alive. Okay, so that is where we are using these scanning techniques, which will be discussed, some other transport layer techniques also. Because what happens, I can also use this ICMP scanning like ping. Let's say I can give ping the entire network. What happens when I give this entire network, let's say 192.168.10.0 network, I'm trying to search whether each and every system on the network is alive or not. Then if I get a reply in the similar kind of fashion which we have seen, if we are getting a reply, that means all the systems which are sent onto the network are alive. But there may be chances that a security device or a firewall kind of thing may be blocking that ping, because most of the ICMP packets are actually blocked by the firewalls, because ICMP is used for error reporting of the IP. IP or the Internet Protocol, as we have talking about the functionalities and the kind of vulnerabilities associated with this, IP doesn't have any kind of feedback mechanism, because it simply uses trying to set the addressing mechanism and trying to send the best path. But to provide this feedback mechanism on the IP, there is one more protocol associated with IP is called ICMP, that whatever we are trying to use this ping command in the background, you can see this, it is saying ping request. Okay, that means whatever the kind of traffic we are generating using IP itself, but still it is a echo request. Our ping is nothing but echo request of ICMP. So here in the earlier packets, you can see the protocol is IP version 4. But whenever it reaches all the packets, we are getting it as ICMP. So this ping is nothing but it's a echo request, one of the part of the ICMP protocol, which will be used for error reporting on the IP protocol. Okay, so now let's say this packet, you can see again the destination is received all the packets, but here we are getting it as echo reply. Now again, still it is a ICMP packet. That means, so whatever the ping we are using, first it will send the echo response or the request. Once the destination response, it will send the echo reply, how we are getting ARP request and reply. Similarly, for IP also, to provide that mechanism whether the system is up or not, we'll use this echo request and reply. Again, we have a lot of types and codes, which I will show in the next slide in the ICMP protocol. Again, we have a lot of types and codes in the ICMP itself to give more granular or the detailed kind of feedback mechanism on the IP network, because IP by default, it is not a what we say by default, it will not throw any feedback to the end user or for the user. Okay. So we have seen this fragmentation as well as the kind of protocol we use. Yeah. The other important part which we are talking about is called the time to live. Okay. Now we have seen this time to live. Why actually maybe by knowing this time to live itself, we can come to some understanding why this parameter is used in the header value. What is this time to live? Anyone can actually guess and can type on the chat box. What is this time to live? Is there any significance that we are using this time to live on the IP packet? No one? Okay. Any random guesses also? Okay. Till the request get processed, data dwelling duration. Any other, sir? Any other answers? What actually happens is with time to live, let's say there is no parameter associated with this. Now I'm trying to use this ping command only. Okay, now let's say my system is located on a different network or on a different organization. Now, whenever this packet is generated, okay, but how much time this packet has to live on the network? Now, let's say if this parameter is not introduced, imagine the kind of packets we generate on a day-to-day basis, and from the discovery or for the introduction of this TCP/IP or the functioning of internet. Now, there may be n number of packets which may be flowing continuously over the network. So there should be some limitation for the packet that is generated. So for this, what we'll use, there is a parameter in the IP header that is called time to live. Now, what happens with this time to live? Again, there is a mechanism. Whenever this time to live or the IP header or the IP packet reaches a gateway, gateway is nothing but any router, or when it switches to different networks. Now, whenever that switches to different networks, this TTL value will be decremented by 1. Okay, that means now let's say I am trying to send from one of my labs to the other lab which is located in a different city. Now, my packet which is generated from my network, it has to cross one router. So once it crosses the router, the TTL value is decremented by 1. Now it will reach the other thing. Yeah, TTL is nothing but the time that the packet still has its before its life ends. Right. So this is what we are discussing. So now, whenever this TTL value becomes 0, that means the packet is dead, or no other router on the network will be forwarding this packet. That packet will be discarded. Whatever the data that is there, first it will try to check the TTL value. If the TTL value is valid, that means at least it should have one TTL value or TTL value of 1 to actually cross that router. If the TTL value becomes 0 or the time to live is 0, that means that packet is dead and that will be discarded by that router. Okay, so but again, there is one particular kind of thing where again we are discussing this information gathering and all the scanning techniques. The other important part as an attacker or an hacker or for information gatherer is that we have the RFC states that there should be a TTL value, but there is no specified number for this. So in this case, what happened is the TTL value, if different operating system vendors are actually using different type of TTL values. Now, let's say in this case, my TTL value is 128, or the kind of thing which I am using here, which is 128. Let's say I'm again 192.168.10.5. Okay, I'm getting a TTL value. You can observe along with the reply, I'm also getting a TTL value of 128. Let me try another system, whether any other system. Okay, still it is 10.3 is also 128. So the current system. Okay, by seeing this value itself, I am assuming that this particular TTL belongs, or the system which is 10.5 belongs to a Windows system. How this TTL is associated with an operating system? Why? Because every operating system vendor has introduced its own kind of TTL value. Whenever we talk about Microsoft or Windows operating system, the TTL value is 128. Or if it is a Linux distribution, it is 64. Or if we talk about any kind of networking devices, usually it will be 255. Now, you can use the same on your systems or in your organization. You can open the command prompt and try to ping any of the machine that you know. Okay, and try to check whether what kind of TTL value you are getting. Is anyone getting any different value other than 128? You can please respond in the chat box. Whether you are getting any other than value of 128, like, or whatever the value you are getting. Only just mention the TTL value, not the other IP addresses, because only mention the TTL value. Just open the command prompt on any Windows operating system. If it's a Linux box also, you can open the terminal. Just try to ping your neighboring machine or some gateway on your network and try to type. I'm not asking about the time, sir. After time, there is one value called TTL. Okay. One TTL we got 220, 255. Okay. Any other values we have got apart from 128? Or else you can also type whether, okay, someone got 63, right? We'll also discuss why they are getting 63. right? We are getting TTL value of 254, 64. Okay, now we got 2 or 3 samples. The one we got is as TTL as 255. Now we can observe in this particular example, which I am trying to show, I got a value of 128. But some sir, they have got 255. Okay, that means it may be a network device or a kind of router or some kind of switch, or someone got a value of 63. But again, if it is a directly connected system within the LAN, because as I said 128, that means it is not crossing the router or any gateway device. But in this case, in one example, I got a TTL value of 63 in one of the organization. That means from which the sir is trying to send the communication, that system is one router behind. That means whenever it crosses the router, actually it has to be 64, that may be a Linux box. So whenever it is crossing the router or the gateway, that gateway is decrementing that value by 1. That means it has become 63. That means it is on a different network, that too is a Linux box. And the other value we are getting 64. 64 in the sense that is okay. That is the Linux box, and that too on the same network, right? And in one thing we are getting as 254. 254 means again, actually it has to be 255 or 254, but it may be crossing some other device. So this is how, I mean, by only knowing the TTL values, now we are discussing the operating systems also. So that is what some type of fingerprinting or kind of thing we can assume based on the values that are is at some part, it is only a parameter in the header value. But using this parameter values also, we can judge or we can assume what is the operating system and how many hops or what is the distance that it is from my system to the other system, right? So this is how we generally gather the information and we try to assess the information that is part of the protocol values, right? I hope this is clear for everyone why actually these protocols are also important, because all the vulnerabilities or the kind of attacks what we are doing, this again depends on the kind of protocols we generally use, right? So so if we get a value of 128, or the other tool also for this is called Tracert. I think where we generally try to use this mostly. I think I'm not connected this network to the internet, but I'll show this command, what the Tracert command will do. So what this Tracert command will do is the same kind of functionality. Okay, now you can see I'm directly connected to the system which I'm doing a demo of. So I'm directly getting 10.5, which is directly connected as one hop. But let's say you try to have this connectivity on the same any google.com or any kind of other website using the same Tracert command. Again, it is in Windows, it is Tracert. In Linux, it is traceroute. So whenever you use this Tracert or traceroute by specifying the IP, you'll get all the kind of intermediate devices between our system as well as the destination system. Now, let's say we are trying to reach google.com. So we can know all the kind of intermediate devices that are available once my system reaches from my particular system to the google.com or any other website. Okay, so this is how this command, and this command, the traceroute, why I'm specifying here is, but the underlying protocol that is used by the Tracert command is based on the TTL value in the ICMP. So whenever, because whenever this traceroute is trying to go to the destination, what it will do is, for the first packet, it will try to generate or craft a packet with TTL value of 1. That means whenever it reaches or it goes to the first gateway or the hop, that will be decremented by 0. Now the TTL becomes 0, so the packet is discarded and it is no more forwarded. But what happens whenever the packet is discarded, the ICMP or the tracer or the destination, it will send a message back to the sender saying that your packet has been discarded because of TTL value has become 0. Now, for the second packet, it will send the TTL value incremented by 1. That means it will send now the packet with TTL value 2. Now it reaches the second one. So it crosses 1, TTL becomes 1. Then it goes to the second one, TTL becomes 0. Again, it will send a reply back. Now it will increment TTL with 3. 1, 2, and third will discard the packet, send the message. Similarly, till it reaches, we'll get all the kind of intermediate hops between this. So based on this value, based on the kind of ICMP protocol also, we use this as a functionality to understand the kind of flow or the kind of path that is available between our systems. I hope this is clear. Right. So this is what we have seen, different kind of things. We have seen the fragmentation packet, the fragmentation samples also we have seen how that is done. And again, a lot of vulnerabilities are also associated with IP also, like where we can change like stack and host fingerprinting, which we have seen based on the TTL values. We can, and the most important part again is IP doesn't have any kind of authentication mechanism, because let's say we are trying to send one communication from a system to system. Basically the IP, maybe the application may have some authentication, but IP doesn't have any authentication mechanism. So based on that, the packets can be spoofed or can be done, where we have a lot of other attacks like access and bandwidth controls, broadcast and multicasting kind of thing. Okay. The other one which you're talking about is about Internet Control Messaging Protocol. This is a supporting protocol for IP. So basically, as we discussed, to get the feedback mechanism about in the communication. Okay, because as IP is not reliable, so we make some reliability using ICMP. Okay, but again, using the ICMP, as we have discussed, we can gather the information using to identify the services also, and what kind of fragmentation problems, even to identify the running operating system. That is what we have currently done. By only knowing the TTL value, we have understood what is the OS type also. And there are some attacks where we can also alter the routing tables also. So these kind of attacks are also possible using ICMP. I'm not going much into the attacking phase because they are discussed in the next levels, but I'll just finish it off this session with scanning techniques. All these we are already doing scanning with respect to the kind of normal things. Next, we'll see one kind of tool with respect to the Nmap, or how the transport layer can also be used to understand or determine the kind of available services on the destination. And this is the simple ICMP header. It's simple, nothing but it will have only two header, most important header values is type and code. So based on the type and code, we can decide what is the kind of functionality of that particular packet. Again, we have a lot of types and codes on this. As we have seen, type 8 and code 0 is for echo request, where we have sent the ping request. And if it is type 0 and code 0, it is a echo reply. Okay. So this is how, or else we can see in this ICMP packet itself. Like if we again go for ICMP header, the only values we have is type and code. We can see is there's a type 0 and code 0. That means it is a echo reply. Similarly, based on the type and code value, we have different kind of communications where the network is reachable. It's types 3 and code 0. If the host is unreachable, I mean, the particular host is unreachable on the network, then it is type 3 and code 1. The host is reachable, but that particular protocol or port is not reachable. So accordingly, we have type 3 and code 2 and 3 respectively. So accordingly, we have different kind of meanings for each type and code of the ICMP header. Okay. So basically, again, we have for both error reporting as well as query also, we use ICMP packets. But the same thing, we can also use the ICMP scan to actually find out in terms of scanning techniques whether that particular system is up or not. Basically, we have already seen this using the ping command. We are using ping as an ping is nothing but a program or an application, but in the background we have seen in the Wireshark also, ping is generating echo reply and echo request. Instead of fragment, we'll just try to generate a sample packet. So we'll only okay. Now you can observe we are actually generated some ICMP. So it is a ping. We are doing as a ping as well as scan to know whether this particular 10.5 is alive or not. So what we are doing, but we are using ICMP only in the background. This is nothing but ICMP messaging control protocol. So we are using echo reply and echo request. So based on my request, I am getting a reply. So this is a simple scanning I can use using the ICMP, and also the mechanisms like traceert. And even from the replies, I can also assess and guess what is the kind of operating system for fingerprinting the OS also. So this is how the ICMP scanning is also used. The other example we have already seen, traceroute, how to find out how many, what is the devices that are available between the path from one particular system to the other destination. Okay, here we can observe one particular system is trying to connect the server on the other end. Now we'll try to, using trace tool, we can come to know what is the kind of packets that can be, or the kind of devices that are available between 6.7.8.9 till it reaches 10.1.1. Okay, so this fragmentation we have already seen in the example, ICMP fragmentation. Again, we have a lot of vulnerabilities like a simple DOS attack, continuously flood the system with ping, do not stop it. At a point of time, the buffer of the system may filled up and it will stop responding. So these kind of attacks are called Smurf attack or ping of death. So there are a lot of attacks with respect to ICMP also. The other important protocol we'll discuss is about TCP. This is a transport layer protocol, and this is also very important protocol of the TCP/IP suite, because this TCP is actually responsible for this reliable communication, whatever we are doing with respect to the applications. Now let's say we open a browser, we type something, we give some credentials, and we give a lot of kind of communications, but this has to be some reliable communication where whatever the data we are sending, if there is any loss in the communication or if there is any kind of issues with that, so it has to be continuous without losing the data. So that is what this TCP will be able to do. And along with that, the kind of full duplex communication is also possible by maintaining all the sessions and the kind of communications that we have started for. Okay. But the main important concept of TCP, or the transmission control protocol, is called three-way handshake. We'll discuss what is three-way handshake. So these are some of the key characteristics of TCP. We have reliable connection setup, we have packet sequencing, we have error checking, and for every packet that is sent, we'll get an acknowledgement that the packet has been received. And if there in some case, if the packets have been lost, then we'll also get the retransmission of lost segments. We have flow control. Even the window size can be negotiated between the end system, like how much bandwidth it can send in one packet. So that kind of is also there. And also multiplexing connections. Multiplexing, as we discussed, at a time, my system, I can initiate 2 or 3 simultaneous connections with with different with different applications also. On a single browser, I can open multiple tabs, but all these can be sent in a single or a multiplex connection that I can have a uniqueness of that. So whenever we talk about transport layer protocols, whether it is UDP or TCP, we generally talk about port. What is port? A port is nothing but it's not a physical port that we see on the physical thing, like the where we connect the wires, but it is a logical connection place. That means for every service we run on the system or on the server or on this communication device, we generally say it as a port. That means, let's say if I'm saying that I am hosting a web server, or I'm trying to run an HTTP service, that means I am associating this particular service to a logical number called 80. If I say I'm using FTP service, in the background it is connected to a logical number 20 or 21. FTP uses 2 ports. One is for data data, and the other one is for commands. For Telnet it is 23. For DNS it is 53. For SMTP it is 25. So for each and every application there is a port number associated with this. So by seeing the port itself, we can understand what is the kind of application or what is the kind of service that is being used by the system. Again, we have 2 power 32 ports, actually 0 to 65,535. Out of this, we have 0 to 1023 are the registered ports, and we can use some dynamic ports range from 1024 to 49,000 or 65,535, where any client can take one random number and can initiate the connection. And whenever we talk about the TCP headers and fields, these are the header values what we have. We have source port number, another one is we have destination port number. We have sequence number. We'll see why actually the sequence number is used. We have acknowledgement number. We have header length. Sequence number is one identification like the fragmentation ID we use, because as we discussed, The TCP uses a three-way handshake, but first let me see about three-way handshake, then we'll have clear idea about the packets. Yeah, this is the three-way handshake what we are talking about. Whenever a client uses the TCP as a transport layer protocol, before it actually communicates with the application protocol, the first thing is it will make a connection establishment with the other party. Now, let's say we are trying to open a browser and we are trying to initiate a connection of on port number 80. Now, the first packet, whatever we are seeing is SYN packet. That means the client says I'm going to start a communication with the server that is running on port number 80. But this packet has to be identified. So again, it will generate a sequence number. Let's say randomly a sequence number is generated. Now we'll only look about the last two numbers. Let's say it is 87. Now the server received the request from the client. Now what it will do? It will again send an acknowledgement to the client, because the client also need to understand that whether the server is ready for communication or not. Now the server is sending an acknowledgement packet. Here, this is the acknowledgement packet. Okay, where we can see, and it is sending an acknowledgement with an value of 88. So generally this acknowledgement will be an increment to the previous SYN sent by the client. Now let's say the client has initiated a connection with 87. Now we are getting an acknowledgement with 88. Now the client is responding for the connection, it is okay, but the client or the server also make sure that the client is also ready for connection and everything is fine. Now along with this acknowledgement, it generates its own SYN with a sequence number. Now let's say in this case, this sequence number of SYN from the server is 60. Okay, this 88 is the increment of 87. Now the client understand, okay, I got an acknowledgement from the server. Now the server is again sending a sequence of 60. Now what the client will do in this case? Now you can observe it is sending an acknowledgement packet with an increment of 61. Okay, that means for this 60, it is an incrementing by 1 and sending it to the server. Now the server will also get an acknowledgement from the client saying that, okay, this is an increment to my previous SYN. So the client is also ready for the communication. Then the actual data will be flowing through the thing. Are there any pre-assigned port numbers for video conferencing? I thought of actually mentioning this, sir, because in most of the organizations, we are currently facing this issue, because as we discussed, the application designer will actually design the kind of ports that need to be done. In most of the video conferencing applications, there are some random ports which are used, because if we talk about any video conferencing applications, there are a lot of features that are inbuilt into. Whether we can chat, we are sending an audio message, we are sending a video message. So based on the different kind of ports are used. Mostly that again depends on the application, but not alone 80 and 443 may be sufficient in some cases. Like if you are using that video conferencing facility, even though through the browser, maybe for authentication they may be sufficient, but for processing the video as well as audio ports, they may be requiring some additional ports also that we need to get from the video conference. Let's say if you are using any third-party video conferencing facilities or devices, we need to understand what kind of ports that are being used by the video conferencing facility. Mostly it will be some random, even if let's say one example of Google thing, actually the Google Duo or some kind of thing, where one of our users are also face the same thing. It is using some 5,000 to 6,000 extra ports for this video and audio conferencing utilities out of the normal scenario where we allow. That means mostly we'll be in an organization context, we may be allowing only a specific ports like 80, 443, which are really required for any mail communication and some other stuff. But some video conferencing facilities may be using some different pre-assigned ports that we need to exactly that can be decided by the application owner itself. So before allowing this video conferencing facilities, it is always advisable to go for the product documentation or with the vendor thing, so that the certain specific ports can be allowed onto the organizational firewall, so that we can have no issues in understanding it. Again, as I said, there may be some different ports for different sort of communications also. Okay, so this is how we have seen. But as we discussed, why actually I'm mentioning this is because the TCP headers, these 6 flags are very important whenever we talk about the TCP communication. We have 6 TCP flags. The first one is called urgent flag. Let's say there is a top priority of communication, then we generally use the urgent flag in this communication. The other one is called acknowledgement. The other one is called acknowledgement because this is where for every SYN packet sent, we'll get an acknowledgement. The other one is called push. Whenever there is a data flow, the push flag will be set. And there is another one called reset. This reset will be invoked when there is an abnormal closing of the connection, or when there is an abrupt closing of the connection. Let's say we are using some application, suddenly we closed it. So that has to be intimated to the other party. So in these cases, the reset flag will be used. Again, we have SYN flag, where whenever we start the communication, we use this SYN flag. And the other flag is called fin flag, which is nothing but the finish flag. Okay. Now let us see one packet of TCP. Then we'll quickly move on to the scanning techniques that can be done with TCP also. Let's say I'm using one particular server. Okay, I have got some TCP packets here. We'll try to see whether, okay. You can observe this is my first packet. This is the 3-way handshake. Actually, the HTTP communication started here. But before this HTTP communication, again, as I said, the HTTP protocol uses the TCP as a transport layer. So what is the first packet we got it? It is SYN. I'm generating a random port number from my client, and I'm targeting port number 80. Okay, so on this port number 80, I'm generating a sequence of SYN. So all these protocols are same: Ethernet and IP. And again, for IP, I'll show only the kind of port. You can observe here, it is 6. That means what are the higher level protocol is TCP. Now this is my TCP header. So we have this source port number, destination port number. This is the sequence number. You can see actually this is the sequence number, but for understanding, Wireshark has given as it is the first packet, it is giving it as 0. Okay, so this is the sequence number, and we can observe in the flags, because flags are also important. Based on the flags also, we can understand what is the sequence number of that. I'm just minimizing this. Now you can observe out of all these flags, SYN is set to 1. So this is the first connection. Now we can observe the second packet is SYN plus acknowledgement. Okay, now again you can observe in the flag, SYN flag is set to 1 and acknowledgement is also set to 1. So we have both flags set into 1, but this sequence is of the server, it's again 0, but this acknowledgement number is the increment to the SYN value. Earlier it was 0, now this is acknowledgement 1, which is an increment to 0, but the sequence number of our server is still 0, that we have to reply using acknowledgement. Now again, in this packet, it's only the acknowledgement is 1. Now again, I'm sending an acknowledgement of 1 to the earlier sequence number. So this is how the 3-way handshake. Now once this SYN, SYN-ACK and ACK is done, then only we can see actually the HTTP communication is happening. So this is how the 3-way handshake happen, and we can observe in every HTTP packet, we can observe the acknowledgement is 1 and push is also set to 1. So this is where whenever there is a data transfer, the push flag is set to 1, right? So this is how the TCP will be used. Similarly, we have UDP also. Similarly, we have UDP. Again, there are a lot of attacks on kind of things. We'll see what is this scanning techniques. Similarly, for UDP, I'll say this and we'll wind up this session of the scanning techniques. UDP is also used for the same thing, but UDP header is very minimal. You can see there are no flags and no control mechanism like TCP. Whatever there is in UDP, only the source port number and destination port number. So it gets then source port from the client, gets a destination on which port number the communication has to be sent, and the communication will be sent. It doesn't bother whether the packet has been sent or reached safely to the destination. Is there any drop? Nothing. Only the header values are very simple, a source and destination port, and the communication will be sent without any kind of three-way handshake mechanism or any kind of other mechanism like that is happening in TCP, right? And these are some of the common UDP applications, like we have DNS. DNS both we have both in TCP as well as UDP. For name query, we generally use for UDP DNS, but in terms of zone transfers, we generally go for TCP. Again, for DHCP server, we have again two ports, 67 and 68. 67 is the server protocol and 68 is the client protocol. That means whenever a client requests for an IP over the network, it generates only on port number 68. And always the server will reply on port number 67, right? So similarly, we have a lot of ports on the UDP also. Okay, yeah. For better understanding of the scanning techniques, because as we have seen in ICMP also we are seeing the scanning techniques, right? But where, let's say there is a case, this ICMP is blocked. Let's say in terms of firewall, ICMP is blocked, but still we want to know whether the system is up or not. But we have understood, even though there is a firewall or security device in place, certain ports will be open. Like let's say there is a website, even the firewall is actually behind that website, the port number 80 has to be allowed to reach the website. Now we use these port numbers or using the transport layer protocols to understand whether how actually we can decide or how we can know whether this particular protocols or the website is up or not. So for this, I'm not going for the installation of all the Nmap tool, because Nmap is one tool that we are going to discuss here. Meanwhile, for better understanding, I also request all the members or the participants to, whatever the tool we are doing as part of demonstration or whenever you're doing the labs at your place, always use this Wireshark tool in conjunction with the tools, because we'll clearly understand what is happening in the background. Because whenever we open the tool and do something, we may get the output, but actually the background functionality or how the kind of packet flow, everything, because this will also help in future upon practice, like in terms of incident analysis also. By seeing the packets itself, we can come to know what kind of issues that we have with respect to these packets. So let me say I'm using a simple command of nmap. So this is the switch that need to be used, nmap -s and capital X. Before that, we have capital T for full scan. I'm using the destination IP address of 10.5. Now you can see in the Wireshark, I'm not specified any port. I'm doing the port scan and all the ports that are available on the target machine. Now you can see how many packets are being generated in the background. Now similarly, in our network also, if we see these kind of packets, that means we need to understand that someone is trying to scan the network or some attacker is trying to do some scanning in our network. So this is how this tool will also be very helpful. Okay. It may take some time because I have not specified, as I'm mentioning, I have not specified any port numbers for this value. So I'm trying to do a scan on all the ports. But still, if someone wants to know what is the percentage of scan that has been done, just again press enter. Now here you can see about 97% is only done. Still there is some more time that it may take. Okay, 23%. So it may take some time. Yeah. Let it take some time. Meanwhile, I'll also show the other version of it. It is called, in Windows, we have two versions of Nmap. The one is called the Nmap. Nmap is available as a command line utility on Linux boxes, as well as some of the penetration testing distributions like Kali, Parrot OS, whatever naming it. And also most of the official distributions of software like Ubuntu or Fedora or CentOS, we have this Nmap for them. But if for Windows, we also have the GUI version of it. And if someone wants to download that from the internet at the places, you can directly go to nmap.org. This is the website from where we can download this scanning tool. Okay, just directly go to this download button, where we have the sections for different kind of things. For Windows, you can observe here it is setup.exe. once we download and install the setup.exe, we get two versions, the command line version along with the graphical version. And similarly, we have similar binaries for Linux RPM based, as well as the source code for different kind of distributions. Even for Mac OS, we have the DMG file. So all it supports almost all the operating systems, Linux, all distributions, Microsoft Windows, Mac OS, FreeBSD. So it supports all the platforms which are available, right? So this is how we can use both the thing. Okay, let me see whether we are done with this. I think it is still taking some time. 72% done. Okay, 74. First, let us scan the full scan. Then accordingly, we'll try to filter how we can filter with only a specific port numbers also. Because in the command, as you can observe, I have given -st, but you can see on each and every port, what -st means is trying to for a full scan. Full scan in the sense, it will try to establish the complete three-way handshake. It will send SYN, SYNAC, and ACK. But instead of the data flow, what it will do, it will send a reset packet. Because the ultimate goal of any scanning tool is not to establish the connection with the client or the victim and to transfer the data. We need to, as an attacker or an hacker, we need to only understand whether that particular service or that particular port is available for me to actually communicate or to understand whether their service is running or not. Now here you can see these are the kind of ports that are open on this particular server. So I have done a full scan. Port number 80 is open. You can see the state as well as the service that is being run. Port number 80 is open. We have port number 135. 139 is open. 443. We have 445. There are different servers. But by seeing this ports itself, I can assume that this is the Microsoft operating system. How? Because we can observe that the ports 135, 445, 139, these are called NetBIOS ports. These NetBIOS ports are mostly belong to the Windows operating system, where by default for this kind of default file sharing and all the other things for RPC communications, these ports are enabled. So by assuming, by understanding the ports available on the system, I can also fingerprint the kind of OS. Why this is also important in terms of scanning is, now let's say as an attacker or an hacker, I need some 1,000 tools, let's say, to do some sort of hacking. But if I know what is the exact operating system that is being used, now I can limit my tools or to mainly focus on that particular operating system. So that is where in terms of information gathering, we also use the scanning techniques to get more information from the target machine, what kind of ports they are using, what kind of services they are using, and what kind of operating system that is associated with it, so that it will be easy. Now here I'm doing a SYN-scan. That means I'm generating all the necessary kind of things. But here I can also observe port number 80 is open. So let me limit this scanning technique here. I'm again stopping this. I'm starting the communication. Now what I will do, instead of all the communication, now I'll use another command or another switch called -S, capital S. So what this switch will do, instead of doing the full scan or the three-way handshake, I will only select send a communication with only SYN. And once I receive the SYNAC, I'll send the reset packet, because there is no need again to establish the connection by sending an acknowledgement to the server. Because my goal, as I said, as a scanning techniques, is to understand whether that port is open or not to establish the communication. And also you can see I'm mentioning another switch called -P. This is to specify the particular ports. You can specify a range or a specific ports. You can differentiate by using the comma after P. So let's say I'm trying to scan only a single port. I think my host seemed down here. Or else I'll do one thing. I'll go for the Zenmap 68. Okay. So this is the GUI version of it. We'll see whether we can done any scanning on this. Okay, my system is not responding. System. Yeah, there may be some system issue with the destination, but as we have seen, so this is how we go for the scanning techniques, where we can decide the kind of ports that are available, and based on the kind of ports that are available, we can actually see what kind of attacks that we can limit to. Okay, and based on that services, we can also have the kind of tools that can be used for this, right? Log into the system. One second. Yeah, my system is up. So I'll just quickly open this command GUI only. So I'll just scanning. The intent scan is nothing but I'm doing all the scan with respect to all the available services and all other stuff. Anyway, is a map. And sometimes we also show that whatever the target we are trying to scan, there should be no specific kind of firewalls, because sometimes what happens is if there are any firewalls that are open, it may again take some time to actually this. So here we can observe I am trying to scan this 10.5. I have discovered these kind of ports, like I have discovered 3389. There is a remote desktop enabled. We have seen there is a 443. There is a web server running. 445. There is a Samba server or sharing service is enabled. 139. This may be a Windows system because a NetBIOS port is running. 3306. Even MySQL port is running. So there may be some database also associated with this. And there are some other random ports 5357 which may be associated with some other service also. And this service is not yet stopped actually, because Nmap, what we have discussed is only the kind of ports that are open. Similarly, it will also try to assess the kind of services, what services that are being used by each and every port. So we'll also can assess the kind of see, it is trying to initiate for the OS detection. So along with the kind of ports that are available, we can also assume the kind of operating system that is being run on the system, along with the kind of services also, whether what kind of remote desktop service is also running on this particular port. We'll try to check once, because this is the normal scanning which we have done for port scanning. But here you can observe, along with this, the first thing it has tried for the OS detection. Next, it is saying that it is NSC. What is this NSC? It is nothing but it is called Nmap scripting engine, where along with the kind of port scanning, there are also some script which are already there as part of the database. So along with this kind of port scanning, the default port scanning doing that what kind of ports that are available. So along with this, there are also scripts, even if you know that Nmap is based on Lua language. So if you know that language also, we can write the scripts and we can embed it. Now you can see this is the full type of scan. So we can, so here you can observe. So along with the kind of ports, we also got a specific versions of this. Now here we know that port 80 is running. We know that is a web server. Okay, HTTP route. But here you can see the version. Here it is running Apache HTTPD 2.4.2 of Windows 32, and also along with OpenSSL PHP 5.4.4. So this is the exact version that is being run on the system. And along with this, we also have 443, the HTTPS version of it. Same in the Apache, two modules are enabled because 80 and 443 are using the same version of the Apache. And along with this, we have 445. As I said, 445 is used for Samba or the file sharing. This is exactly Windows 7 Professional, the target which I'm trying to scan for. because it is using a certain version of 445 with 7600 Microsoft Directory Service. And also we have other even the remote desktop server, but what kind of a name, what kind of NetBIOS name that the system contains, all the kind of information relating to the information. And even 5357 is also belongs to one of the HTTP service of Microsoft, HTTPD 2. This based on SSDP or the universal plug and play protocol. Okay, so these are all the systems, even the host scripts, it is trying to find out what are the names, the Samba discovery, and also any kind of trace routes, any kind of routes is also available with this kind of thing. So everything is actually mapped in here with this kind of information. Okay, so and also it is trying to find out the exact OS matches, but sometimes we may not get the 100% OS, but it gives a random guess of what kind of OS might be possible. So here it is saying it is a Windows, some sort of Microsoft operating system, but it may not be give the complete what we say, the complete system information, but it may give some random guesses or some accurate information of that particular kind of operating system also. So this is how, along with the port scanning, the scripting engines can also be used to enumerate more information or to fingerprint or scan more kind of information. Okay, so this is about one of the tool this is most widely used. As I said, nmap.org, you can download it and you can explore that. 192 dot, I'm not sure, sir, whether this IP address, because 192 generally it is a private IP, this may not be reached from the public. But again, also keep in mind that whenever we do the kind of port scanning techniques, do not do on the public environments, because it may be illegal also in some aspects. So it always better do in terms of legal activities only. Okay, so this is how the scanning techniques can be used, and the tools like Wireshark as well as the Nmap are used with respect to that. So I hope this is clear, and if you have still any kind of issues, we can take up, or we can go to the next participants or next host to actually take over. Any issues, sir? You can post it in the chat box, or as we intimated, we are also available in the WhatsApp group. So you can post the queries at any point of time in the WhatsApp group, so that we can reply accordingly. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Nandishwar. I request now Mr. David Singh to start the session. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yeah. Now we are able to hear you.
Okay, shall we start the session?
You want?
Here, my presentation is visible.
Yes. You're